So we've got these cards. Know your enemy. UK most wanted COVID crooks. It tells you the different things about them here, and as you can see, this is the backs of them, and the front. This tells you how to play the game if you wanted to play the game, that is. And I'm not going to go through all of them. Just going to go through the special ones. You know, like let's start off with, say, Professor Neil Ferguson. Organisation ICL, aka Professor Pantsdown. Profile: erstwhile Sage member forced to resign after breaking lockdown for an affair with a married woman, notorious for widely inaccurate and grossly exaggerated politically motivated modelling of epidemics from foot and mouth disease to COVID-19. Wanted for pandemic fraud, domestic terrorism, accessory to genocide, crimes against humanity. Another one here, of course, Sir Patrick Vallance. GlaxoSmithKline organisation, Sage UK Chief Science Advisor, aka Professor Doom, appears to wear the trousers in relationships with UK CMO Witty, frequently misleads the public with fake doomsday scenarios at Downing Street briefings. Wanted for pandemic fraud, aiding and abetting illegal government crimes against humanity, profiteering and genocide. And we've got a joker now, literally. Of course, it's Dominic Cummings, UK government's, aka Dominic Cummings. Conniving political strategist, advising PM Jack Boot Johnson from July 2019 to November 2020 when he left in protest that lockdown was not stringent enough. Cynically broke lockdown to test his eyesight driving to Barnard Castle, home of GlaxoSmithKline. Shock there, eh? A manipulative man without conscience who sells his soul to the highest bidder. Wanted for treason, malfeasance, aiding and abetting illegal government corruption and abuse of power, accessory to democide. And we've got the satanic Carrie Summons. Conservative Party, aka Madsin Sorcerer. Profile: just as behind every great man there is a great woman, behind every duplicitous man there is a scheming, malicious woman, as in the case of Carrie Symonds, who married PM Jack Boot Johnson in a secret Westminster Cathedral ceremony on 29th of May 21. The day one of the biggest protests in British history took place in London against the lockdown crimes of the UK government. Wanted for aiding and abetting illegal government corruption and abuse of power, fraud by false representation. And the not so pretty Patel is next, of course. UK government, aka Ugly Patel. UK Home Secretary who introduced some of the most draconian legislation in British history, e.g. police crime, sentencing and courts bill, covert human intelligence sources bill, and also the Coronavirus Act. Wanted for misfeasance, perverting the course of justice, corruption and abuse of power, domestic terrorism and treason. And we've got this equally as ugly thing, Dame Cressida Dick, who's probably a bloke anyway, but who knows. Organisations: Met Police, aka the Dick Woman. Profile: Met Police Commissioner who incited disability hate crime by calling for public shaming of non-mask wearers, also responsible for violent policing of peaceful protests during the bullshit scam. Wanted for domestic terrorism, aiding and abetting illegal government misconduct in public office, perverting the course of justice. And of course we all know this piece of shit. Of course it's the most dishonourable Matt the Wancock. Organisations: UK government, and a surprise World Economic Forum. Well, who'd have thought, eh? AKA Hancock, Midazzle and Matt, Madge, Granny Killer Matt, Profile, UK Health Minister at start of the bullshit scandal. Oversaw deaths of tens of thousands of elderly people discharged from hospital and neglected in first wave. Guilty of cronyism and profiteering via PPE contracts. Wanted for democide, treason, pandemic fraud, malfeasance, crimes against humanity, domestic terrorism. And let's not forget mass murder. And of course, this one here, not so much to do with us, but just as evil. Nicola Sturgeon organisation, Scottish Government, aka the Great Dictator. We Jimmy Cranky. Profile, First Minister of Scotland turned tin pot tyrant who governed illegally by ministerial decree during the bullshit scandal. Wanted for treason, democide, fraud by false representation, malfeasance and domestic terrorism. Little Jimmy Cranky. There we've got this one now. Of course, we all know this piece of crap is, of course, none other than Dominic Raab. UK Government, aka the Turnip. Profile, UK Foreign Secretary who stood in for PM Jack Boot Johnson when he was in hospital with apparently COVID. Of course, that doesn't exist, so he can't have been. Just as he was in hospital with bullshit, just as complicit as the rest of the cabinet in pandemic fraud, crimes against humanity and treason, confessed high false positive rate of PCR tests during a mainstream TV news interview. Wanted for treason, democide, malfeasance, domestic terrorism, crimes against humanity. And this little prick, of course, Michael Gove, UK Government, aka Donkey. Profile, Cabinet Office Minister who performs the donkey work of the Johnson Jaunter, e.g. heading a review into bullshit status certification when it was abundantly clear any such scheme would be gross violation of international treaties as well as domestic laws and should never have been contemplated. Wanted for misfeasance, fraud by false representation, corruption and abuse of power, domestic terrorism. And of course we all know this piece of crap. Sadiq Khan, Organisations London Assembly, aka Genghis Khan, Sadist Khan. Profile, Mayor of London during the bullshit scandal, responsible for heavy-handed Gestapo-style political policing of anti-lockdown protesters as well as targeted arrests of key figures in the resistance movement. Wanted for malfeasance, perverting the course of justice, corruption and abuse of power and domestic terrorism. And here goes one of the kingpins, although he's not a king and he's not a pin, he's just their face, because as I'm sure you all know, there's a government behind every government, and that government that's behind the government is always there. That's why things hardly ever change when it changes from Conservative, Labour and Lib Dem, whatever, all bunch of shit anyway. Name, of course, Boris Johnson, Organisation UK Government, aka Jack Boot Johnson, Bozo the Clown, Doris, Alexander Boris de Foffel Johnson. Profile, UK Prime Minister turned dictator who governed illegally by ministerial decree throughout the COVID scandal. Wanted for treason, domestic terrorism, pandemic fraud, malfeasance and democide. And here we have none other than Mark Drakeford, Organisation Senedd Cymru, aka the Red Draconian. Mark Draconian Drakeford. Profile, First Minister of Wales turned petty dictator who governed illegally by ministerial decree throughout the COVID scandal, barred from over 100 pubs for banning alcohol under COVID rules, wanted for malfeasance, antisocial behaviour, treason and democide. And here we have the other half of the corrupt cabal. Sir, that tells you he's a pedo for a start, Keir Rodney Stammer. Organisations Labour Party, aka Radical Rodney. Profile, fake human rights lawyer and leader of the fake opposition, failed to hold government to account over grossly disproportionate and harmful COVID policies and in fact called for harsher measures. Famously kicked out of the Raven pub in Bath for his part in the one-party biosecurity state. Wanted for malfeasance, collaboration with illegal government, perverting the course of justice. This is more like one of the real kingpins. Savage Javid, Organisations UK Government, aka Savage Javid. Profile, UK Health Minister after resigning of the compromised Hancock. Continues relentlessly rollout of unprecedentedly lethal and harmful COVID vaccines. You can't call them vaccines, COVID kill shots would be a better term. Complicit in all government crimes against humanity, such as COVID status certification. Wanted for democide, crimes against humanity, domestic terrorism, malfeasance and treason. And here we have another piece of shit. Nadim Zawahi, UK Government, aka the Lemon Kurd. Profile, Vaccine Minister complicit in duplicitous government policy, often lied about COVID boys kill shot damage and went back on his word about vax passports and jabs for children. Wanted for democide, crimes against humanity, malfeasance and domestic terrorism. Of course, we all know this piece of shit. He's one of the biggest pieces of shit in the land. Apparently, he's at Nottingham University now at the moment. Jonathan Van Tam, Organisations, SAGE, Vaccine Task Force, aka John Claude, Jabber John, Penfold, Profile, Deputy CMO, responsible for COVID medical malpractice, including discharging tens of thousands of sick elderly people from hospital into care homes in first wave, midazolam abuse, DNR orders, ICU ventilator misuse, mass injections with unsafe and ineffective experimental gene therapy, all resulting in thousands of deaths. Wanted for medical malpractice, malfeasance, genocide, domestic terrorism. And here's another one. Of course, it's Professor Chris Whitty. Organisation SAGE, aka Professor Gloom, Chris Whitless. Profile, UK Chief Medical Officer during the COVID scandal, therefore criminally negligent for the tremendous harm caused to the population due to his insistence on lockdowns of healthy people. As CMO, the population in his patient to which he should first do no harm. In this he failed unforgivably, therefore treason is added to the charge sheet for this monster. Wanted for pandemic fraud, treason, genocide, medical malpractice and negligence. We all know this evil piece of satanic shit. Tony Blair, Organisations, Tony Blair Institute, World Economic Forum, aka Tony Blair, or Tony Beliar. Profile, unprecedented war criminal who advocates mandatory trial gene therapy at the expense of human rights and in violation of the Nuremberg Code. Wanted for war crimes, genocide and profiteering. And here we have Jenny Harris, Organisations, NHS Test and Trace, SAGE, UK Health Secretary Agency, aka Scary Harries. Profile, Deputy CMO with Van Tam at start of the bullshit pandemic. Later appointed to head of the Orwellian Health Security Agency, which in April 2021 replaced the scapegoated Public Health England, the Health Security Agency, in search with the Joint Biosecurity Centre, plunging the UK further into medical tyranny dictatorship. Wanted for medical malpractice, corruption and abuse of power, accessory to democide, domestic terrorism. And here's the other piece of shit. The so-called Doctor Hilary Jones, Organisations, Medtate, ITV News, aka Dr. Shillery. Profile, board member of Medtate, partnered with Gavidan, who's major shareholder in the Gates Foundation, in-house doctor for ITV News, where he constantly shills for oppressive public health policies, as well as lying about every aspect of COVID. Often slanders those who object to government oppression, disagrees to the medical profession, should have been struck off long ago. Wanted for medical malpractice, fraud by false representation and defamation. Piers Morgan, the pedo. Formerly ITV, aka Shouty Piers Morgan Moron. Profile, broadcaster extremely intolerant of any suggestion that COVID measures were disproportionate, passionately favours harsh and prolonged measures, insults and shouts down anyone who disagrees, truly a jackass of trades for certainty. Master of none, wanted for fraud by false representation, aiding and abetting illegal government, crimes against humanity, defamation. Tobias Elwood, 77th Brigade, MOD, Conservative Party, aka Total Bias Elwood. Profile, MP and reservist in British Army 77th Brigade, which conducted COVID psyops on its own population. Elwood constantly demands military impositions of medical tyrannies, so one of the most wanted for his tendency to use military force against civilians. Wanted for war crimes, accessory to democide, crimes against humanity, domestic terrorism and treason. And we all know who this piece of shit is. It's Jeremy Vine. Organisations BBC, Channel 5 TV, aka Jeremy Wine, Jeremy Vile. Profile, condensing, smug, overpaid current affairs commentator on BBC Radio and Channel 5 TV, pretends to be a serious journalist but never questions the government COVID narrative. When challenged by his audience about this, said in his whiny voice, "We have to trust this system, don't we?" Wanted for fraud by false representation, professional negligence, misappropriation of public funds. Hugh Pym, BBC, aka Who Pay Him. Profile, BBC News health editor who fails to allow proper scientific discourse about COVID on the BBC, always recites government scientific advisor without criticism, complicit in BBC policy to never discuss poison safety, no doubt on the take from the WHO as well as BNM Gates. Wanted for professional negligence, aiding and abetting illegal government, fraud by false representation, misappropriation of public funds.